Commencing countdown.
3, 2, 1.
This is the Contracting Experience, connecting government contracting professionals to the world around them through conversations with acquisition influencers, insights into evolving hot topics, and sharing lessons learned from the field.
In this episode, we sit down with Air Force Life Cycle Management Center Program Manager Major Paul Weisgarber and Procurement Contracting Officer Noel Burke to talk about their experience working on the Special Operations Command GHOST program. Major Weisgarber and Noel give insights into what the GHOST program is and the culture they experience there. They also share their advice to anyone thinking of applying for the program and what they learned that has shaped their perspective for future assignments in the Air Force. Welcome, Noel and Paul, to the podcast.
Hey.
Thanks for having us.
For sure. All right, Noel, first question is for you. What is the GHOST program and where does it take place?
Yeah, so the GHOST program has been around for about 15 years, and it takes place down at SOCOM, which is Special Operations Command, down at MacDill Air Force Base. It's a 4-month deployment. And so it looks a little differently between the military and the civilian world, but there are military and civilian ghosts that go down for 4 months. It's a deployment experience, and you're going down there to learn these, soft special operations forces, that culture, the principles. You're rubbing shoulders with the users in a joint environment. I know, I've been around Wright Pat most of my career, other than this deployment and a OCONUS deployment in my past. But you don't always get to rub shoulders with the user and talk with them. Whereas when you go down there, that the user is an integral part of the IPT, and it's a much smaller, flatter organization and team that you're working with. And so you might be supporting someone who's deployed on the other side of the world saying, I need this capability right now to finish my mission. And so you're supporting those people. And it's really it's to broaden your experience. You go down there, not because you've done all the soft stuff, but so that you can learn as a junior acquirer. They're really looking for those junior folks, less, 10 years or less. Mm-hmm. And they're really desiring to help mold the next set of leaders in the Air Force. And so when you get down there, you one of the first things you do is you get access to senior leaders as mentors. You get to talk with the acquisition executive of SOCOM. You get to get full detail calendar access to his calendar as well as other SESs. And if they have a really unique or interesting meeting that's going on as a ghost, you can just say, hey, sir, ma'am, I'd really like to attend that meeting. And they say, sure, come on, learn, experience. And so it's really great to go down there. You get stretched, you learn to do things in a different way. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about some of the differences, but that's really what they're looking for. And then they're also looking for, once you leave the GHOST program and you go back, how can you use those experiences, those broadened experiences and skills to go execute the mission back home?
Yeah, and I think what I would add, Amber, real quick, is just from the PEO's perspective at SOCOM right now, this program is to be the premier program for junior acquisition professionals, right? To let them do exactly what Noel just described, immerse themselves in all of the tactics and tools and procedures, all the policies that are used at SOCOM, and then bring that home to their home unit, let that percolate throughout their own program offices and contracting offices, and then leverage those best practices that folks are using at SOCOM at their home station, and just let that permeate throughout the Air Force and eventually the Space Force as well.
That's great. So I think that's a good segue, Paul, into the next question. Can you talk about the culture you experienced in the Ghost program?
Yes, I think that's such a great question because this is, I think, in our opinion, Noel and myself, probably what is invaluable about the experience is immersing yourself in that culture. And I think the best way to answer that might be to set up what our expectations were going into it. And a lot of ghosts, I think, feel the same way. When you hear about SOCOM or just any rapid acquisition program office, you typically, at least we have this preconceived notion of it's the Wild West, right? They're doing things very fast and at times maybe on that line of unethical or illegal. But down there, it's anything but that, right? They still have the same Department of Defense directives, the 5000 series. They have the same financial acquisition regulation, FAR. They have the same financial management regulation, FMR guidelines that we have to use down there. So they're not playing under a different playbook, if you will. It's all the same rules and regulations. But the big MO of SOCOM is to tailor every single project accordingly and appropriately. And they do that through a couple different ways that really, again, kind of just shows itself through its culture. First, it's a very flat organization. There's the Milestone Decision Authority, the MDA, for nearly all the programs at SOCOM is down at the O6, the colonel level, the PEO level. And he or she oftentimes drives the decisions down to the lowest levels. I think one great quote that Colonel Kibler likes to use is he likes to have a very close proximity to the decision maker, meaning if it's a decision that can be made by that lieutenant or by that GS 9 or 11 or 12, he is going to empower that person to make that decision, and he will support you in that. And so it's fun to see everything that you read about or learn about in a DAU course or a textbook about flat organizations. It's really fun to see that being practiced down there, and it does wonders to an organizational culture. And then the second thing is just the overall emphasis on schedule. That is, as Noel mentioned, getting users and operators capability as quickly as possible. And it kind of has this mindset of let's get an 80% solution today or tonight out to that field or to that operator versus the 100% solution tomorrow or next week. And again, this permeates throughout the organization. Users know that their capabilities are going to iterate. They're not going to get the gold-plated solution right away, but they're going to get something. They're going to do some great things around the world with that capability. Because we've emphasized schedule and prioritized that through KPPs and KSAs, key performance parameters, key system attributes. These are things that are really important to the government. Time to field and getting capability out to the warfighter as soon as possible. So I think at least from my experience, those are what manifested themselves in the culture of SOCOM, and I'm sure Noel has a couple others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you one difference, and then I'll give you a couple of examples, because I can almost anticipate, the person listening to this podcast thinking, "Oh, that's nice, but I work in such and such office, and that's never going to happen." So yeah, sure is nice, pie in the sky ideas, but when you look at the big Air Force, if I have to go to the head of the contracting activity, the HCA, for some approval for something in my acquisition, that's going all the way to General Holt or whoever the next person is going to be in DC. And so there's a lot of levels of review and a lot of people are looking at it. When I was down at Ghost and I wanted to talk to the HCA, I literally stood up from my cubicle. I looked to the left, and about 60 feet away was the office of the HCA for SOCOM. And so I could just go in and say, "Hey, sir, I'd like to talk to you about this circumstance." Colonel Oberg fellow, who's now up at Wright Pat, he was the HCA when I was down there. And it was a great opportunity. It was a much flatter rather than all the different levels and layers. But a couple of examples, just so you can appreciate this. But I was handed a requirement for the MQ-9 for the soft unique platform specifically. And they said, "Hey, we need this awarded yesterday and we don't have time to run this. So here, Ghost, run with this and go do it. And oh, by the way, the PEO this is a hot priority for him and he's going to be checking in on you constantly." And so in a matter of 52 days, I was able to run a $28 million proposal to award. We shaved off several $1 million and we accelerated the delivery schedule by 5 months. So, that's an example, not to point out to me, this is just what happens at Ghost. So, that kind of experience where they give you that responsibility and they say, we trust you to go execute this and go do good things for SOCOM. Another example was there was a $145 million OTA that they were looking to negotiate. Unfortunately, there was this really, really aggressive award schedule that someone above said, hey, let's get this done yesterday. And so myself and two other ghosts, we volunteered and said, hey, can we negotiate that for you? So in a few days, less than a week, we were able to price, negotiate and get a handshake on a $145 million OTA. And so they put the responsibility in our hands and let us run and experience that. And it was a fantastic experience. So those are just two examples that I think are helpful in giving you a perspective of, what you might be doing at Ghosts.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Noel. Yeah, I think the examples are helpful because, like you said, people are thinking, well, that's a totally different situation than what I'm in every day. And that's just not the way it works around here. But I guess and this kind of question is to both of you, is in those situations, what was different? And just some of the things that I picked off from your answer, it sounded like, the expectations were set that, hey, we're going after this and we're going to do it. And everybody's on board with that. As well as it sounded like you had the bandwidth, and I'm not saying bandwidth as far as like you had all day, every day to work on that particular requirement, but you had the bandwidth of like, I can go talk to the people that I need to talk to in a expedited manner, and we all understand what we're trying to do to make that happen. And so if you could talk to that, but also anything else that you think would be helpful for the teams listening to say, hey, maybe these are areas where I can go work with my IPT team to figure out if we can do this on our end a little better, or work with my leadership to say, hey, if we set these expectations in place that we're all working to the same sheet of music, maybe we can make this go a little faster and make sure it's getting out to our requirements owners faster.
Yeah, that is a really great question. And so I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this, Paul, on chain of command. But from my perspective, when they delegate down decisions to the lower levels, and I know, obviously I have a right pad experience, so I've been here for a while, so I can speak to that. I can't speak to, Hanscom or other bases that are large and major acquisition hubs. But, I think the chain of command is very important and followed, and sometimes to our detriment, where it's, oh, well, we got to include this person. And then it's like we have all of these pre-briefs in order to get to the decision authority. That doesn't mean that there's no dry runs that don't occur down at SOCOM. I know there were plenty that the ghosts where we were briefing some senior leader and we would dry run it beforehand, but we would not do several iterations at various different levels until we got to it. It was much faster because there was a trust there, and they recognize we're all running in the same direction of we need to get this delivered to the warfighter, rather than did you cross all of your T's and dot all of your I's in your file. It was more, are we getting what we need to the warfighter on time and what they need? I don't know. What were your thoughts on chain of command? Did you see difference, Paul, when you were down there?
No, I think that hits the nail on the head. And the one word you used that I'd like to expand upon it was the trust, right? And there was the leaders of each individual program executive office or PEO really trusting their people. And it's easy just to say on a podcast, but we got to see it firsthand, right? The '06 Colonel Kibler, he trusted his '05s, his '04s, all the way down to the Ghosts, who were captains and GS-12s and 13s. He trusted them that they were going to make the right decision because they were the trusted expert, not to use the word trust too many times, but they were the expert in their field. And when you have a leader or leaders with that mentality and letting that push down the organizational structure into a flat organization through their trust, I think that's how you enable that type of freedom and maneuver, right? You get that through the trust of your leaders and also the leaders trusting you to do the right thing. So that, I think, is the way I would summarize it. Again, the chain of command, you're spot on. It's important, but as long as you over communicate and keep he or she, your supervisor and their supervisor, apprised of the situation, what I saw down there was full autonomy, full runway to make those key decisions at any point.
Yeah, Paul, you really you picked up on the same word that I did, that when he said there was trust there, that really stood out to me as well. And I think even just thinking about, how we do business and all of that, but trust doesn't mean that nobody's ever going to fail. Like, I don't trust people to never fail. It's that you're giving people the space and you understand that those people are really they're working with the best interests in mind of the Air Force, of their customer, of the team, to get things done, and that it's, nobody's trying to step out on purpose to do something they're not supposed to do. And so that really struck a chord with me as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that the FAR, it has its place. Certainly, there are some things that work really well, but the FAR is not for rapid acquisitions. It's really more of a system of compliance. Did you do this? Did you check this box? Did you do that? Sometimes it's very value added what it asks us to do, but other times it's like, man, I went through business clearance and I just got hammered for, I didn't have this in my file, but it didn't necessarily help me get to the table, and it doesn't necessarily benefit anybody. It's more just, did you check that box? So again, don't want to throw the FAR under the bus completely, maybe like on one side of the bus, but really having that mindset of what is in the actual best interest of the warfighter. A lot of times as a contracting officer, we're writing, this is in the best interest of the government. But I think what's important here is, yes, that's true, but I'd really like to make that a little bit more personal and say, what is in the best interest of the warfighter? Does he care that you did some DNF for whatever, or does he care that you got the capability in his hand on time? And that really drives me for sure. I know when I was in the F-15 program, I was the lead PCO for the EPAWS program, and that was one of the hardest and best jobs that I ever had, because we all recognized the importance of the mission. We've got an EW, electronic warfare system, that is obsolete, and the warfighter is taking all the risk by not having something delivered. And so we were all driving and running with scissors to try and deliver that capability to the warfighter, because that was the person that mattered the most.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I appreciate you guys expounding on that, because I think that it's super important to get kind of those real world stuff that people need to hear. And I think, it's not that we're not trying to give them all the answers, but just getting them thinking about what was so important there. And I think that's a huge one, is trust, right? And how you can build that within your teams to make things happen. So we talked probably a little bit about this already, Noel, but how was the relationship you built with your functional team?
Oh yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say, so there's definitely a relationship that you need to have with all of the players on your IPT, your team, with logistics and engineering and all that. But I think the most key relationship is between the program manager and the PCO, the contracting officer. I have been on lots of different teams throughout my time, and I have seen a wide gamut of that, healthy relationship. Was it really healthy? Were you on the same page, or was one of you checked out? And I'm not saying this as only PMs are checked out. I've heard stories of PCOs who are checked out as well, and weren't engaged as they needed to be for whatever reason. Sometimes it's bandwidth, that they're on lots of programs or what have you. But when that relationship is, and we go back to trust, if there's trust between the PM and the PCO that you're going to do what you said you were going to do, and I'm going to do what I said I was going to do, and we have the same goals in mind. If we're trying to acquire some new capability, if my goal is to get the best price, but the PM's goal is to deliver it on time, there's a disconnect that's not going to be successful. And so, getting on that same page of, am I willing to pay a little bit more so that I can get it on time, or is price more important to me? And making sure that you're you're on the same page. I know one of the programs that Paul and I worked when we were down at Ghost together was high speed VTOL, which is a high speed vertical takeoff and landing. And we were kind of, I won't say we were blazing a trail, but we were working a SIBR effort on something and we were kind of the only people. There was 3 or 4 of us that were working that program, and people were very interested in it, but it was just us. It was a very small team. We had a lot of trust among this small team to execute this and get this on contract, and also set it up for the next ghost that would come and take that program over, because you're there for 4 months. And so we want to do it with excellence and set that program up so that it can be easily handed off and executed with enough next folks coming in.
Yeah, and I think, Noel, you hit the nail on the head with respect to Amber's specific question. If I can, I'd love to expand that question just a little bit from not just the government IPT, but to all stakeholders, right? Anyone who can impact or can be impacted by the program at large. And what we noticed down at SOCOM was that relationship between the government and the contractor, right? And a very subtle phraseology change from calling them the contractor to an industry partner. I know that might seem just like a phraseology change and something minor, but it really does change the whole tenor of every conversation you have and your team has when you think about the contractor as a partner, an industry partner, and whether that's a small business, a non-traditional, or a traditional defense contractor. I think everyone down there used the term industry partner, and it just made your conversations as a PM and as a contracting officer to your appropriate colleague on the other side of the aisle that much more productive and cordial and collaborative. And so that relationship was as good as I've seen in my career. The relationship between the government and the industry partner. And I really think it has a lot to do with just how the mindset of calling them an industry partner versus the contractor. So I noticed that as well.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, that's a good add and distinction to make, that even just referring to people in a different way than maybe you're used to seeing them, right? I mean, even if, we've been in negotiations before and stuff like that, and sometimes it can get a little back and forth, but when you're really trying to reach a goal together, being able to address each other in the proper way to make it more of a partnership, it helps. So I'm glad you added that for sure. All right, Paul. So what would be your advice to someone thinking of applying for the GHOST program?
Yeah, so let me try to answer that at the practical, kind of pragmatic level, and then maybe Noel can hop in with some higher level thoughts and philosophical thoughts on an application. But as with any job application, I always recommend people to reach out to somebody who is in that position currently, or just recently was in that position. And very easy to get a hold of Ghosts. If you can go onto the Air Force portal, just search Ghost, and it'll bring you to a common access card protected link that can get you in touch with the current Ghosts. And so that'd be the first step, would be get in contact, see how the program get in contact with the current Ghost, see how the program may have evolved to what Noel and I are describing today, but really figure out if this would be a good fit for you professionally and personally at the current time in your career. So reach out and get that first person experience would be number one. Number two, if you do decide to go to that next step and apply, just you'd be surprised to hear about how many application packages show up to SOCOM that just haven't had the attention to detail that we quite expect. And so just organizing your application package exactly how it was described in the instructions, putting it in a single PDF, things like that can automatically kind of get you put into a different pile if you just don't follow those simple directions. And it really shows some attention to detail if you miss some of that stuff. So just have somebody proofread it, have someone who potentially had some experience as a Ghost or knows somebody that did the Ghost program, have a friend look at it. I think that's good pragmatic advice as well. And then the last thing that I think is important to the Ghost experience and you'd want to show in your application package is just being physically fit. So physical training, PT, is a big part of the Ghost program. We do PT nearly every morning. six days a week, and that's in part because the men and women that we're supporting, they are in some very austere locations, and we want to make sure we're embodying that whole airman concept and showing that we want to be fit to fight and be ready if we have to. In some cases, go downrange and support those men and women right next to them. So I would say those three things are all things that someone could start literally today. Reach out to somebody and start your application process package, and then just making sure that you prioritize that physical fitness and physical training aspect of your life would be very helpful.
Yeah, and that's great. And I would also add when you do your application, it's a very succinct application. It's a one-page application, and you're trying to capture your accomplishments in a very succinct way. And it looks a little different between the PM and the contracting officer application. I can speak to the contracting officer application a little bit better just because I went through the experience, but they want to know, what have you done? Because when you come down there, you're expected to go execute. So if you're brand new to the government, you might want to wait a couple of years and get some more experience, go see and do a lot of things. But they're looking for people who have a particular kind of mindset, people who are willing and comfortable with thinking outside the box, whether you call it, outside the box or living in the gray or whatever example, whatever way you want to qualify that. But people who are willing to think differently about how to acquire. And anybody can say that. Anybody can say, oh, I'm an outside the box thinker. But being able to say, I'm an outside the box thinker, and here are some examples of how I used that outside the box thinking, that's really what you're trying to accomplish. What did you do to accelerate the delivery schedule? What did you do to get that handshake? What method or unique way did you do something to increase the performance or incentivize the industry partner to do something unique or interesting that benefited the warfighter? So I think that's really important, that you not only say you got that mindset, but also show that. And if that's not you yet, but you're interested in this program, I think it's important that you go and do your job with excellence and be thinking outside the box. One of the things that there's other transaction authorities, OTAs, there's other types of things out there that are not your traditional FAR path. Go experience that. Go check those out so that you can see a different way of doing things, and then you have something to show when you apply. Say, yeah, look what we accomplished for the warfighter.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for expounding on that. I think that's helpful if somebody's thinking about applying, knowing like, hey, technically you need to make sure your package looks good and what you need to put in there, and that you're conveying the message that the people that are deciding need to understand in order to choose the proper person for that position. So I think that's good. So this last question is for both of you, and Noel, I'll go to you first. What are your biggest takeaways from participating in the program?
Yeah, I would say that when you can think outside the box, when you come back to the big Air Force, because one of the things that this program is for is to equip you and help you to see how to do things differently, and then go back and execute in, I'm going to say, big Air Force. I had never heard that term until I went down to SOCOM. But that when you have that mindset, when you have that experience to back, you're going to look at things and say, do I really have to do it that way? Is that necessary? Does that help? One of the things that is sometimes hard for people is you can't always have the best price and speed. Sometimes you have to choose. And I know, Paul and I have talked about this before, and sometimes SOCOM is willing to pay more because they get things delivered in a timely manner. And I know that, many of you listening to this, you've probably been in that experience where it got delivered and it was either obsolete upon delivery or nearly obsolete. And, it just kills you. It's like, man, we just spent all that time and money and all this to get this solution, and it's kind of worthless or dead upon arrival. And so sometimes you have to choose that, I'm going to pay a little bit more for this so that I can get this at the speed of need, rather than, well, I got the best price and I saved X number of dollars. I would also say that the traditional acquisition route, it's not always in the best interest of the warfighter. And I know that could sound edgy or like I'm going rogue, but using the FAR, sometimes that's exactly what you need to do. But other times, you need to be thinking about, as we're looking at near peer competition, and we're looking at our just the environment the world is in right now. I think it's known. We've had several iterations of trying to improve the FAR, and we haven't quite gotten there. I'm not sure we will, just because it is a system of compliance, and so it's hard to break away from a compliance mindset when you've been living in it. And that's me. I'm raising my hand. Been living in a world of compliance, and so being able to think differently on how to acquire so that it's in the best interest of the warfighter, rather than just, well, does my reviewer like my file and have I checked all of the boxes? Not to say that, obviously our reviewers are doing their job. They're doing wonderful things. And I can't tell you how many times they've pointed something out and like, oh, thank you. I didn't even think about that. I need to think about that for the delivery schedule or whatever. So don't hear that I'm saying anything negative about those folks, but we do need to think outside the box. And that was really what I brought away from that experience. General Brown says, accelerate, change, or lose. If we have a general telling us to accelerate and change, we probably ought to do that. And that means we're going to do things a little differently.
Yeah, and I would just quickly add that if you want an opportunity that is laser focused on the operator, and you get to see the fruits of your labor, then this would be a great opportunity to apply for. Or if you're not in that career timeline that we talked about before, I would seek out someone who's done the Ghost program that's within your organization, and just grab a coffee with them. Ask them about their experience. Ask them how they thought outside the box and thought critically during their time at SOCOM. So perhaps you can learn a few different things and tactics that they might have used. But the biggest thing for me was this was such a great opportunity to see the fruits of your labor. You aren't stuck in a post-milestone C in sustainment program that you oftentimes might not understand why you're doing what you're doing. This is an opportunity that not only do you learn what to do, but also why you're doing it, because your fruits of your labor, like I said, are pretty apparent just because of the speed that SOCOM brings to the acquisition realm. So would urge you to apply if any of that sounds appealing, or to reach out to an alumni of the Ghost program to just hear about their experience.
All right, Noel and Paul, I want to thank you both for being on the podcast and sharing your Ghost perspective with the workforce.
Thank you so much for having us. That was great.
Yeah, had a blast. Thank you, Amber.
If you have suggestions for topics or people to interview or feedback on the podcast, you can submit those at thecontractingexperience@gmail.com. I want to thank you all for listening to the Contracting Experience podcast. Until next time, keep connecting to the world around you.